There's a profound moment in every person's life when they realize they've been living as a stranger to themselves. You wake up one day and look in the mirror, and the person staring back feels unfamiliar, like someone wearing a mask you don't remember putting on. You've spent so many years adapting to others' expectations, performing roles that others assigned you, seeking validation from external sources, that you've lost touch with the most fundamental question of human existence. Who am I when no one else is watching? Søren Kierkegaard, the father of existential philosophy, understood this crisis of authenticity better than perhaps any thinker who ever lived. He knew that the greatest tragedy of human existence isn't death, poverty, or even heartbreak. It's living an entire lifetime without ever meeting your authentic self. Kierkegaard wrote, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are." And he discovered that this despair, this disconnection from your true nature, can only be healed through one path: the courageous embrace of solitude. Today, I want you to understand why Kierkegaard believed that solitude isn't just beneficial for self-discovery, it's absolutely essential. That until you learn to be completely alone with yourself, until you can sit in silence without needing external validation or distraction, you will remain forever a stranger to your own soul. This isn't about becoming antisocial or isolated, it's about what Kierkegaard called the inward journey, the most important expedition you'll ever undertake. And before we explore how Kierkegaard's insights can guide you toward authentic self-discovery through solitude, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. I want to know, when you're completely alone with no distractions, do you feel peaceful or anxious? Your honest answer might reveal exactly where you are in your journey toward finding yourself. The first thing Kierkegaard understood about self-discovery is that most people spend their entire lives running from the one person they most need to meet: themselves. You fill every moment with social activity, work obligations, entertainment, social media, anything to avoid the uncomfortable silence where your authentic voice might finally have a chance to speak. Kierkegaard called this the sickness unto death, not physical death, but the spiritual death that comes from never becoming who you truly are. This avoidance isn't accidental. It's a sophisticated defense mechanism that your psyche has developed to protect you from what Kierkegaard called the anxiety of existence, the fundamental uncertainty and responsibility that comes with being authentically human. It's terrifying to face the possibility that you might not be living the life you actually want, that you might have spent years becoming someone you don't even like, that you might need to make fundamental changes to align with your true nature. So instead of facing this anxiety, you lose yourself in what Kierkegaard called the crowd, constantly seeking external validation, approval, and direction, because it feels safer than trusting your own inner guidance. You let other people tell you who you should be, what you should want, how you should live, because making those decisions yourself would require taking full responsibility for your existence. But Kierkegaard discovered that this strategy, while temporarily comforting, ultimately leads to what he called despair, the deep spiritual suffering that comes from living as someone you're not. You might appear successful to others, you might even feel happy sometimes, but underneath there's always a sense that something essential is missing, that you're performing your life rather than living it. Number 1. Solitude reveals the voice beneath the noise. Kierkegaard understood that your authentic self has been trying to speak to you your entire life, but its voice has been drowned out by what he called the noise of existence, the constant chatter of other people's opinions, expectations, and influences. In solitude, when all that external noise finally quiets down, you can begin to hear what your own soul has been trying to tell you. This voice, what Kierkegaard called the voice of inwardness, doesn't speak in the language of logic or social convention. It speaks in the language of intuition, authentic desire, and what he termed passionate intensity. It tells you what actually matters to you, not what you think should matter. It reveals your genuine values, not the values you've adopted to fit in. It shows you your authentic dreams, not the dreams others have projected onto you. But here's what Kierkegaard discovered. This voice only emerges in the absence of external influences. As long as you're constantly surrounded by other people's energy, opinions, and expectations, you'll continue to mistake their voices for your own. You'll think you want what they want, value what they value, dream what they dream. Only in solitude can you begin to distinguish between what's authentically yours and what you've unconsciously absorbed from your environment. This is why Kierkegaard considered solitude not just helpful, but absolutely necessary for self-discovery. He wrote, "The individual must stand alone to find God," and by God, he meant the divine spark of authenticity within yourself, the irreplaceable essence that makes you uniquely you. This essence can only be discovered when you're willing to be completely alone with yourself, beyond the influence of anyone else's definition of who you should be. Write in the comments now, "I listen to my inner voice." Say it like you're making a commitment to trust your own guidance over everyone else's opinions. Number 2, solitude forces you to confront what Kierkegaard called the anxiety of choice. One of the reasons people avoid being alone with themselves is that solitude inevitably brings you face to face with the reality of your freedom and the responsibility that comes with it. When you're constantly distracted by external influences, you can pretend that your choices are limited, that you're just following the path that's expected of you, that you don't really have options. But in solitude, this illusion collapses. You're forced to confront the radical freedom that Kierkegaard believed is the essence of human existence. The freedom to choose who you become, how you live, what you value, what you pursue. And with this freedom comes what he called the dizziness of freedom, the overwhelming anxiety that comes with realizing that you're responsible for creating your own meaning and direction in life. Most people find this anxiety so uncomfortable that they immediately seek escape back into the crowd, back into roles and expectations that someone else has defined for them. But Kierkegaard understood that this anxiety, while painful, is actually a sign that you're approaching authentic selfhood. It's the discomfort of taking full responsibility for your existence instead of letting others live your life for you. In solitude, you can't avoid the fundamental questions of existence. What do I actually want? What gives my life meaning? What am I willing to sacrifice for? What am I not willing to compromise on? These questions can only be answered by you for you. And the answers can only emerge when you're willing to sit with the anxiety of not knowing while you wait for your authentic truth to surface. Kierkegaard called this process the leap of faith. Not necessarily faith in a religious sense, but faith in your own capacity to create meaning and direction from within, rather than constantly seeking it from external sources. This leap requires the courage to be alone with uncertainty until clarity emerges from your own inner depths. Number 3, solitude reveals what Kierkegaard called the passion of inwardness. In his philosophy, Kierkegaard distinguished between what he called objective truth, facts and information that exist outside of personal experience, and subjective truth, the passionate personal understanding that gives life its meaning and direction. He believed that subjective truth, the kind that actually transforms how you live, can only be discovered through what he called inward reflection. In solitude, away from the pressure to be objective, rational, or socially acceptable, you can finally access what you're genuinely passionate about. Not what you think you should be passionate about, not what would be practical or impressive to others, but what actually ignites something deep within you. Kierkegaard believed that this passion, this intense personal investment in certain values or pursuits, is what gives life its authenticity and meaning. But this passion of inwardness can't be discovered through external research or social comparison. You can't figure out what you're passionate about by looking at what other people are passionate about. You can't discover your purpose by analyzing career statistics or following trending topics. Your authentic passion emerges from a deeper place, from what Kierkegaard called the eternal in man, the timeless aspect of your being that transcends social trends and external pressures. This is why solitude is so crucial for finding yourself. Only when you're alone, only when you're not performing for anyone else or trying to meet anyone else's expectations, can you access this deeper level of authentic desire and meaning. Only in solitude can you distinguish between what genuinely moves you and what you think should move you. Hit like if you're ready to discover your authentic passion, and subscribe if you want more insights into Kierkegaard's philosophy of authentic existence. Number 4. Solitude teaches you what Kierkegaard called the art of existing as an individual. In Kierkegaard's time, as in ours, there was enormous pressure to conform to social expectations, to blend into what he called the crowd, to define yourself through your roles and relationships, rather than through your authentic individual nature. He saw this conformity as a form of spiritual death, a betrayal of the unique individual that each person is called to become. Kierkegaard wrote, "The crowd is untruth, not because groups of people are inherently bad, but because when you define yourself primarily through your membership in groups, you lose touch with your individual essence. You become what Kierkegaard called a copy, a reproduction of social expectations rather than an original expression of authentic selfhood. In solitude, you're forced to exist as an individual rather than as a member of a group. You can't hide behind social roles or define yourself through your relationships with others. You have to confront the question, who am I when I'm not being a daughter, son, employee, friend, partner, or any other social role? Who am I in the silence of my own existence? This confrontation with your individual essence is often uncomfortable because it reveals how much of your identity has been constructed from external sources rather than from your authentic inner nature. But Kierkegaard believed that this discomfort is necessary for what he called becoming an individual, the process of developing an authentic self that exists independently of social validation or approval. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or antisocial. It means developing such a clear sense of your own identity that you can interact with others from authenticity rather than from neediness, from wholeness rather than from seeking completion through relationships, from choice rather than from social obligation. Number 5. Solitude connects you to what Kierkegaard called the eternal perspective. One of the most profound aspects of Kierkegaard's philosophy is his understanding that authentic selfhood requires what he called the eternal perspective, the ability to see your life from the standpoint of ultimate meaning, rather than just immediate circumstances. In the constant rush of daily life, surrounded by other people's urgencies and demands, it's easy to lose sight of the bigger questions. What legacy do I want to leave? What kind of person do I want to become? What values do I want to embody regardless of external circumstances? How do I want to be remembered? What would I regret not pursuing if I knew I only had a limited time left? These questions, what Kierkegaard called the questions of eternity, can only be properly considered in solitude, when you're not pressured by immediate social demands or distracted by external stimulation. In solitude, you can step back from the urgent and focus on the important, from the immediate and focus on the ultimate, from the social and focus on the essential. Kierkegaard believed that this eternal perspective is what gives life its depth and meaning. When you're constantly focused on external validation, social comparison, and immediate gratification, life becomes shallow and ultimately unsatisfying. But when you connect with the eternal perspective through solitude, when you consider your existence from the standpoint of ultimate meaning, you begin to make choices that align with your deepest values rather than your immediate impulses. Write in the comments, "I choose the eternal over the immediate." Say it like you're committing to live from depth rather than just reacting to surface circumstances. But here's where Kierkegaard's insight becomes truly revolutionary. He understood that this journey into solitude, this confrontation with your authentic self, isn't a one-time event, but what he called the task of existing, an ongoing process of choosing authenticity over conformity, depth over surface, individual truth over collective opinion. Every day, you're faced with the choice between what Kierkegaard called the aesthetic life, living for immediate pleasure and social approval, the ethical life, living according to universal moral principles, and the religious life, living from your deepest authentic commitment, regardless of external circumstances. And this choice, this ongoing decision about how to exist, can only be made authentically when you've spent enough time in solitude to know who you actually are beneath all the social conditioning. Kierkegaard called this ongoing choice the repetition, not the mindless repetition of habits, but the conscious repetition of choosing your authentic self over and over again, even when it's difficult, even when it's socially awkward, even when it requires you to stand alone. This repetition, this ongoing commitment to authenticity, is what gradually transforms you from someone who's living according to others' definitions into someone who's living according to your own truth. But perhaps most importantly, Kierkegaard understood that this journey toward authentic selfhood through solitude isn't selfish or narcissistic. In fact, it's the opposite. When you've done the inner work to discover who you truly are, when you've learned to exist authentically as an individual, you become capable of what he called genuine love. Love that comes from wholeness rather than neediness, from choice rather than compulsion, from authenticity rather than performance. The person who has never found themselves in solitude brings incompleteness to every relationship, unconsciously expecting others to fill the void where their authentic self should be. But the person who has used solitude to discover their true nature brings wholeness to their relationships, sharing themselves rather than seeking completion through others. Kierkegaard wrote, "The door to happiness opens outward," meaning that true fulfillment comes not from what you can get from others, but from what you can give from your authentic self. But you can't give what you don't have, and you can't have an authentic self until you've spent time alone discovering who that self actually is. And this is where everything changes. When you finally embrace solitude, not as punishment, but as opportunity, not as loneliness, but as self-discovery, not as isolation, but as individuation, you begin to live what Kierkegaard called the passionate life, a life driven by authentic inner conviction rather than external validation. You start making choices based on your genuine values rather than social expectations. You begin pursuing goals that align with your authentic nature rather than goals that look impressive to others. You develop relationships based on genuine connection rather than mutual neediness. You create a life that reflects who you actually are rather than who you think you should be. The world will try to convince you that this journey inward is selfish, that focusing on finding yourself is narcissistic, that you should be more concerned with fitting in than with being authentic. But Kierkegaard knew that the opposite is true. The person who has never found themselves has nothing authentic to offer the world, while the person who has done the inner work of self-discovery becomes a source of genuine inspiration and connection for others. You become what Kierkegaard called a witness to the truth, someone whose very existence demonstrates that it's possible to live authentically in a world that often rewards conformity. Your willingness to be yourself gives others permission to explore their own authenticity. Your courage to stand alone when necessary shows others that it's possible to maintain integrity even when it's difficult. So if you've been avoiding solitude, if you've been filling every quiet moment with distraction, if you've been afraid to spend time alone with your own thoughts and feelings, Kierkegaard would tell you that you're avoiding the most important appointment of your life, the appointment with your authentic self. The person you could become, the life you could create, the relationships you could have, the contribution you could make, all of it is waiting for you in the solitude you've been avoiding. Not because solitude is magical, but because it's only in solitude that you can hear your own voice clearly enough to follow its guidance. Learn to sit alone without needing entertainment or stimulation. Practice being with yourself without judgment or agenda. Allow yourself to feel whatever emotions arise without immediately trying to fix or change them. Ask yourself the deep questions and wait patiently for answers to emerge from your own inner wisdom. When you do this work, when you finally embrace the solitude that Kierkegaard knew was essential for authentic selfhood, you don't just find yourself, you create yourself. You become the author of your own existence rather than a character in someone else's story. You develop the courage to live according to your own truth rather than according to others' expectations. Write in the comments now, "I am ready to meet myself." Say it like you're finally willing to take the journey inward that Kierkegaard knew was the most important adventure of human existence. This is Kierkegaard's great gift to anyone seeking authentic existence. The understanding that you are not just a social role, not just a collection of other people's expectations, not just a product of your circumstance. You are a unique individual with irreplaceable gifts, authentic desires, and the capacity to create meaning from within, rather than constantly seeking it from external sources. But this individual, this authentic self, can only be discovered in solitude. Until you embrace the quiet moments, until you learn to be comfortable with your own company, until you develop the courage to listen to your inner voice over the crowd's opinions, you will remain a stranger to the most important person in your life, yourself. If this message resonates with you, if you're ready to begin the inward journey that Kierkegaard knew was essential for authentic living, then you've found your community. Subscribe to join others who understand that the courage to be alone with yourself is the first step toward finding yourself, and that finding yourself is the first step toward living a life of genuine meaning and fulfillment. Because when you finally embrace solitude and discover who you truly are beneath all the social conditioning, you don't just change your own life, you become a beacon of authenticity in a world that desperately needs people who have the courage to be genuinely themselves.